It became one of the most feared execution methods of the 20th century because at times it failed to deliver quick, painless death that it promised, and instead it produced gruesome, unpredictable, and prolonged executions. The electric chair is most closely associated with the United States of America, and its reputation for being a brutal device is supported by a number of accounts in which things went very wrong with the chair of death. The electric chair was introduced in the 1890s in New York to replace hanging, which had a history of slow strangulations, botched decapitations in which the head of the condemned would be taken off, and also public horror if the gallows was used in front of large crowds. At the time, electricity was believed to be more scientific and humane, and there was an assumption at the time that strong electrical current could instantly shut down the brain. It was thought that the powerful electric shocks would also stop the heart and breathing and kill within seconds, but in reality this almost never happened as planned. Instead of instant death, electricity usually caused extreme internal heat and chaotic muscle contractions before the brain shut down. What actually happened in the chair included violent muscle seizures in which the body would arch violently against the restraints, and the condemned clenched their fists and teeth snapped shut. Also, witnesses described seeing the prisoner pulling against the straps. Electricity heats tissue internally, meaning that the skin could blister or peel, blood vessels could rupture, and the flesh could sometimes be charred. In many executions, smoke rose from the head or the leg electrodes, and stench from burning hair and flesh filled the execution chamber. The grotesque fear attached to the electric chair largely stems from the possibility that prisoners were conscious for part of the process. Human brains vary in their resistance to electricity, and incorrect voltage could affect the experience. Instead of instant unconsciousness, some inmates remained aware during the first shocks, and others were stunned but not fully unconscious. Several victims were heard groaning or gasping. In some botched executions, prisoners tried to speak or cry out, or breathed and moved after initial jolt cycles. Also, they required multiple shock sequences lasting minutes. Botched executions, because of this, were more common than you would imagine. Things that could go wrong included voltage miscalculations, dry or misaligned electrodes which were attached to the body, poor contact causing insufficient current, and equipment malfunctions. This meant that victims would writhe in pain, shocks would have to be reapplied, and executioners may even have to pause the proceedings. The first man who was executed on the chair was William Kemmler in 1890. The initial current knocked him out, but didn't kill him, and then a second shock was applied and smoke rose from his head. The second shock administered was 2,000 volts, and blood vessels under his skin ruptured and bled, and some witnesses claimed his body caught fire. The New York Times reported that, and I quote, "An awful odour began to permeate the death chamber, and then, as though to cap the climax of this fearful sight, it was seen that the hair under and around the electrode on the head and the flesh under and around the electrode at the base of the spine was singeing. The stench was unbearable." Another man who suffered a botched electric chair death was Alan Lee Davis. He was executed on the 8th of July 1999, and whilst the shocks were administered, he bled profusely from his nose, and he also experienced burns to his head, leg and groin area. Jesse Tefero also experienced something similar as the machine malfunctioned, and this led to 6-inch flames shooting out of his head. Now, one of the most disturbing parts of the execution process using the electric chair is that witnesses, and often family members of the victims of the condemned's crimes, are invited to see the death and execution take place. This, of course, could be very disturbing, and they would see through a window, and curtains would be opened before the shocks were applied. But witnesses described loud crackling electricity and the smell of burning skin, as well as seeing the prisoner's body convulsing heavily. Many guards and journalists, who were also present at executions, later claimed that they suffered from trauma after seeing an electric chair execution. Unlike the lethal injection method, which takes place on a hospital gurney in a relatively quiet setting and state, the electric chair displayed violence openly, had visible suffering, and also created unpredictable outcomes. The process to some resembled torture. Also, for the condemned, they had many questions, and the method they would select inspired terror in their minds. They never knew whether it would be fast, whether it would fail, and what they would feel. Prisoners begged not to be burned on the chair, and some later changed to receive other methods of execution. They also experienced that they were powerless after being strapped into the chair. The electric chair was feared not because it represented death, but because it demonstrated how mechanized executions can become industrial torture when technology fails. Rather than offering mercy, it often produced public agony, protracted deaths, visible burnings, and psychological terror. Now, it has a reputation as being one of history's most brutal execution devices for a very good reason. Thanks for watching. If you found this video interesting, maybe click subscribe. Once again, thanks for giving up your time to watch one of these videos.